to the Java journey. A little bit of a break in between the last episode, but here we are. Hopefully we'll be a little bit more consistent. I say that every time and, same thing happens. But this time, definitely. So take my word for it. So basically in our previous episodes, right, we laid out a foundation with variables, control flow, methods, and arrays. But today, right, we're going to be embarking on a crucial phase. Object-oriented programming, OOP, basically, right? So OOP is a really powerful paradigm that allows us to model real-world entities and their interactions within our code. So we start with the fundamental concepts of classes and objects. So I've already created a class called car, so go ahead and create that in your chosen IDE, and then we will move on from there, basically. So essentially, just to explain what a class is, right? It's like a blueprint or a template that you have, and that you use for creating objects, right? An object will be an instance of a class, and we'll look more into that as we go on. So what we're going to do inside of the car class, we're going to define two variables, right? So model and year, as you would have for for an actual car. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll start off and say string model, right? And then semicolon, and then we're going to do int, and then year. Perfect. Just do integer. Perfect. Integer year. Awesome. So what we've done here, we've created those two variables, and what they really represent here is the attributes or the properties of the car. So each car object that you create later on will have its own model and year values, and these are also called fields or member variables. Okay, great. So now we've got those two variables initiated. What we're going to do is we're going to have our loc and create a constructor. So let's go ahead and type with me public car. Remember, your constructor will have exactly the same name as your class, right? And inside of the constructor, we'll have two things, right? What we want to do when we're creating an object. So firstly, type with me string model. I know IntelliSense is giving that to us, but we're going to type it because that's the best way to learn. So integer and then year. Great, and then open up your curly braces. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and set those values, right? So this dot model is equal to model, and then the same, this dot year is equal to year. And again, making sure that you are typing that, because I think it's really, really important that you kind of get used to it, right? So what happens when we create a car object, right? The constructor is something that's called automatically, right? And the keyword this, right, it refers to the current object. So, for example, this dot model is equal to model, right, assigns the value of model parameter to the model instance variable that we have, right? So, great. Now that we've got that, what we're going to do is we're going to quickly create another method that's going to use to kind of display the information about the car into our console. So let's go ahead and do that, right? So let's start with public void, because remember, we're not returning anything like we learned last time, right? We're printing something out into the console. So we're going to call it display info. I think that's good enough, right? And then inside of here, we're going to do system dot out dot println. Okay, we're going to do, in quotes, we're going to do model. I don't know what's showing there, so let's go ahead and do that model, right? Give it a little space afterwards, and then type in model, right? And then plus, and then we have that completing anyway. So this is correct. This is exactly what I was going to type out anyway, but make sure that you are typing it out, all right? So that we have that, and what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and give it a little comma here, so that we can accept that. So what we'll do when we call this function, right, on the object, it's going to print out, the value of that particular object that we've created. The one thing that's really, really important, right? We've created this class, right? We've done all of that. We've created a method as well. What's next? And there's one really important thing that we need to do now, right? Is we need to create the main function. So let's go ahead and do that, right? type with me, public static void main. I was going to type main void, obviously that's completely wrong. So string, yeah, args, and again we can just accept that completion there. Cool. Now what we're going to do is we're going to instantiate that, right? Now we're going to talk about objects, right? We've discussed already that it's an instantiation of the actual class that we have. So let's go ahead and type car. So that's the name of our class. I'm going to use car1 as it suggests. And then we're going to do equals. And then we use the keyword new here, right? And that's really important. I'll explain that later. So car. And remember, in our constructor, we have a model and a year that we need to enter, right? Of type string and of type integer. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we're going to do is we can call it, yeah, you know what? Let's go for BMW. That's absolutely fine. And then the year, we're going to give it 2023. And then make sure that you include your semicolon here. And then what we're also going to do is we're going to call that display info function that we did last time. So car1, right, dot notation here. And then you can just do display info, and then you're good to go. And what we need to change here is I accidentally put the year in a string, and what's really, really good about your IDE is it's going to throw an error if you're doing it wrong or if it's expecting like a different type. So that's really, really good. So let's go ahead and remove that, and we should be passing in like this. Now we haven't got any errors, so we can go ahead and run our application and kind of see what's going on. So let's go ahead and run, then we'll walk through some of the changes that we made. This is the main method. Let's go ahead and run. Cool. As we can see here, right, it's run, and what's printed out here is the model, BMW, comma, year 2023, exactly how we have put it here in our object that we've created. So let's understand a little bit about what we've just done, right? So in the main method that we've just written, we have created a object called car1, okay? And we use the new keyword to create a new instance of the car class and pass the model and year as arguments to the constructor. Remember, in the constructor we added model and year, so we pass that in when we're creating a new object, okay? And then what we've done is we've called the display info method on the car1 object. So what we've done here, car1.display info. That's how you would call a method, right? From an object. So we've seen the result already, right? And what you really need to understand for a class, right, is that it's a blueprint, right? And objects as a house, right, that's built from that blueprint, right? If you want to think of it in real terms, that's the best way to look at it. And what we do is we can create, right, multiple car objects, each with its own unique model and year values, and in each object has its own state and behaviors. And that's really the core concept of OOP, right? So what OOP is, right, it helps us organize our code, make it more modular and easier to maintain, and allows us to model real life entities and their interactions, making our programs more intuitive and powerful, right? So let's go ahead and recap what we've learned today, okay? So the first thing, classes, they're blueprints for creating objects, right? They are instances of classes. Instance variables, right? They're attributes or properties of an object. We have a constructor that we've looked at today, right? It's a special method for initializing an object, and a method, right, which is a behavior or actions that the object can perform. And really what you need to understand, right, classes and objects are foundations of OOP, and you're going to be using it a hell of a lot, right, in real life, and make sure that you include it when you're actually coding as well, okay? But by mastering these concepts, you'll be able to create more complex and sophisticated programs. Keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next episode where we'll explore inheritance and polymorphism. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.